balancing the scales. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Balancing the Scale podcast with your boy O and
V.
And we're so excited to be back with you guys. As always, you know, these episodes do drop on Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can also catch them on our Instagram page, our Facebook page, at Balancing the Scale on Facebook. For Instagram, you can catch them on _Balancing the Scale. You can follow our YouTube as well at Balancing the Scale to watch the video content, or you can just follow our social media and you can catch the video content there also. So before we get started, I want to pay some bills and let you guys know that you are much loved. You are very much well appreciated for your experiences while on the planet. Everyone that's connected to you is going through an experience that's necessary for your existence and theirs, and all parts of your life are vital and they mean a lot. So do not feel like what you're going through is minor. It is very valuable and it means a lot to anyone and everyone that's connected to you. So much love to you guys. Tithing. Oh, the hot topic of tithing. Tithing is an interesting one. And it's interesting in a sense because it's sensitive. So let us put this disclaimer out there, right? Do you want to do the disclaimer? So it's not... She doesn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But in all actuality, you know, we're not telling you that you shouldn't tithe. Remember, we don't do that on this podcast. These are just our experiences that we're sharing with you. These are the reasons why we do not tithe. But that does not mean that you do not have to tithe. But this is why we do not tithe. Now, I'm going to break down and give our reasons. She's going to ask a ton of questions as to why maybe we should be. She's always on the fence about it. Right? You're always on the fence about it, right? I mean, like...
Okay, we'll call it the fence, yeah.
Okay. So if you're always on the fence about it, then, you know... Or if you're not, whatever. Whatever it is. But anyway, these are our experiences. And we're going to break down to the religious, esoteric... the exegesis and the hermeneutics, because for those who are very deep into religion out there, you just can't say, I don't tithe because I don't want to, right? For those who are more spiritual, you can tell them that and they can just vibe with you because they're on the same frequency as you. But for those who are a little bit more religious, they want to know a little bit more why, right? Just so they can pretty much try to debunk what you have to say and still do whatever it is they do. Okay. So,
do you tithe?
I don't tithe.
And why not?
And it depends on how you define tithe.
Okay.
All right.
So how do you define tithing?
Well, tithe is simply a tenth of something. Tithe is tenth. That's simply, okay. That's all it really is. Okay. So basically, it's so much information that has to be unpacked with dealing with this. First, let's go ahead and define what tithe is according to the Bible, because that's going to be our primary foundation. I mean, overall, when you look up tithing, it just means tenth. But when you're talking about the Bible, there are many layers to that. So if you're looking at the understanding of tithing from the Mosaic law expression of tithing, it means food, mint, dill, common, meat, produce, seed of the ground. It's food. If you're looking at it from the Abrahamic expression of tithing, it was never a law. It was a choice to give whatever you wanted, like your time, spoils of a war, like he gave. As a matter of fact, Abraham gave spoils of a war to Melchizedek by choice, because he had just won, because Melchizedek was the high priest in that time. And then where Abraham came from, there was an understanding of the tenth, which was always just like a 10% of whatever.
So you're saying that in the Bible, when people are referring to tithe, at least in the Old Testament, what they were talking about was bringing a tenth of the produce that because most people were probably farmers or shepherds. So bring a tenth of your cattle or bring a tenth of your whatever your fruits that you yielded that year, and then bring it to the highest priest.
Right. Yeah, so
that's where they were bringing
where you
it
mixing them. So the high priest was from Abraham back in Genesis.
So when the other part in Leviticus, when he's saying
that's the law.
Okay,
that's when it became.
Where are they bringing it to?
So they're bringing it to the Levites. The Levites had no inheritance; they had no land. So the only place that they lived was basically at the church, and they worked in the church. And so people brought food for them so that they can eat, because God told them that they could not have an inheritance.
Which would be kind of like pastors now, who live off of their primary job is to provide guidance and to provide, like the spiritual, practices for the people, just like the Levites did.
Well, technically, pastors today aren't just surviving off of that.
Most are. Some are.
Well, no, most are not. Most have, even if you go to the big name preachers, they have an inheritance.
Those people are making it.
They're making it. But when you think about the storefront churches, they have regular jobs, so they have an inheritance to a land.
So you would give tithes to a pastor who
I wouldn't give tithe at all, but yeah, go ahead.
So if a pastor was living off of just what he makes off of the church, he doesn't have a secular job whatsoever, then people are supposed to tithe at that church?
No, they're not.
Why not?
Because tithing was a part of the Levitical law. And so whenever, according to Hebrews 7, whenever the priesthood changed, when Jesus became the high priest, and he kind of governed over all of the tribes, basically the law then in essence changed, because there was no Levites anymore, because Jesus sprang out of the east, which is the tribe of Judah. Judah did not have Levites, so there was no need for a tithe. So when Jesus became high priest, there would be no need for Levites anymore, because he was the high priest.
Aren't we supposed to, according to Malachi 3, it says, will a man rob God, which is kind of what you're doing. You're robbing God. Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and in offering. Ye are cursed with a curse. For ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me how herewith saith the Lord of hosts, that I will open up a window, shake down, press down.
Okay, so what is a meat house?
A place where they store meat. I'm thinking like a refrigerator type situation.
It's very clear. It's very clear in its understanding. It's just that, I feel like a lot of times people try to overcompensate with their faith and their spirituality, so they just kind of overlook basic information. Like
what I'm saying is
bringing the meat and the tithe into the storehouse is for food, to store food and meat so that they can have food.
Because those Levites back then didn't have a job, and so they're saying, listen, the Levites, you don't have to bring furniture, and you don't have to bring a house, because they're staying at the church. Now what you do have to bring is what they don't have. They don't have money to go and buy food, because this is their job. So please bring food into the storehouse so that these Levites can come ahead and eat. Now Jesus is the high priest, and now Jesus is saying, y'all still need to bring y'all tithes to the house, to the temple, because we still got pastors out here who are who need to eat, who don't have a secular job to survive. And so now we're bringing loads of like cattle, because none of us are farmers anymore. We're bringing our money, which makes sense.
Okay, so here's the thing. So now we have to unpack everything you said. First of all, there aren't any Levites anymore, because there is now a new high priest, which is Jesus. So now everyone can have an inheritance to a land, which is why pastors are allowed to write books and have homes. Otherwise, they would be living in the church. They wouldn't have a house. They wouldn't be getting these salaries. They wouldn't be none of that. They would be living in the church. Even the small preachers, they would be living on the land of the church and receiving food from the people, not money.
What I'm saying is that what other people understand.
And I'm not done yet.
Okay, go ahead.
I have to unpack everything you said. That's the first thing. One, we're no longer under the law. We're now under grace. Grace says that if you pick one part of the law and not all of it, you're then cursed with a curse, which will segue me into why people of less fortune continue to tithe and yet see a habitual pattern of lack. So, second thing, if the law then changes, if the high priest now changed, there's no more Levites, which means people are not just living in the church anymore. They actually own homes. That alters the law and the way that it was written, right? So if that is changed and that is altered, and I'm not saying that people shouldn't get money for their gift. Let me explain. If you're preaching and you're playing music, you're utilizing your time, you deserve to be paid. Period, point blank. It is a responsibility because you have to understand that church is a business and it takes money, and the people have to give their money freely to keep the upkeep of it, right? Those nice sanctuaries, you have to pay for them. I get it. So with that being said, you also mentioned something about.
What I'm saying is that Jesus is now. I'm trying to help you remember.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, what I said was that pastors are now. We're not no longer. We don't need to bring them a rack of lamb or some ribs. We just bring them a tenth of our paycheck, which then they will govern accordingly to what they need. We don't need to bring people. And besides, we don't even know people's dietary issues right now, so we don't need to be bringing. You're acting like, it's tithing is only food and seeds and whatever. That's because that's what people were doing back then. Now we have currency. We have money. So
they had currency back then too. They didn't tithe their currency. They had silver, gold, currency, shekels. They had money.
Yes, but those Levites didn't have that money, and so the Levites didn't. They just needed to survive.
Well, technically, they did. Let me explain. So, they had no inheritance, but the people had a choice to, if they had to go a long way to the gate, right, or to the church, they can turn their tithe into money. That's in Deuteronomy, the 14th chapter. If you read the 20th verse through the 27th verse, it talks about how they actually could take their tithe, which is food, meat, if you want to say spoils of war, it doesn't matter. They can take it and turn it into money, currency, silver, gold, coins, shekels. In that era, it was coins, shekels, silver, and gold, right? And they can buy whatever. This is in the Bible. They can buy whatever their soul lustered after, food, wine, or whatever. If it's too far for them to carry their tithe to the church to give to the Levites. But then it says that once you turn that into whatever you want, food or whatever, if there's a Levite that passes by, let them partake with you. Like, don't
so if there's a pastor that passes by, the one that you go to the church all the time, who's serving you up some good word, who's helping you, guiding you, praying for you, then that man or woman deserves a tenth of whatever you make too. And if you want to go take them some ribs, Orlando, go take them some ribs. But the rest of us want to take them 10% of our check.
Well, the point I'm trying, like I said, this is why I don't tithe. If you want to tithe 10% of your income, which is not necessary, nor is it if you're following the Bible thoroughly, it's you're basically cursing yourself.
Why am I cursing myself?
Because, as I explained earlier, it's a part of the Mosaic law. The reason why people tithe, right, in the common era, now they're getting more to the point to where, okay, well, I just want to give a tenth because I just want to give, right? And so we could talk about the whole Abrahamic faith, where he gave a tenth from spoils of a war to Melchizedek. And we could talk about Jacob, who decided that he wanted to give a 10%. But understand that Abraham, according to Genesis, actually, I think it's in Genesis, I can't remember, I think maybe Genesis 13 or something like that. But Abraham was rich in silver and gold. He was rich. He had money out the wazoo. But when he went to war, right, and every spoil that he had, he just gave a tenth to Melchizedek because he was the high priest. Because he was the high priest and he was the king. And so he was just like, hey, here's a tenth. I just want to give this to you, right? Jacob told God that, hey, if you bless me, I will give you a 10%. If you bless me, though, I'm not giving it to you outside of that.
Well, there's a lot of people who really swear by tithing, and a lot of people who hold on to that part that I was reading where I think after verses 8 and 10 starts all the blessings, and like, test me not in this, that I will bless you, that I will make you like a ruler among nations, like all these other things that God says. God, not even any of these other people, not Abraham, not Paul, like this is God speaking. If you give me a tenth, I will bless you with all these things. And people truly believe that. And so it's hard for people to even try to stomach what you're saying about not tithing.
I think that people lack not all. I think some people are lacking basic fundamental thought behind money. I'm serious. Like for example, a person who has a home, a nice job, they're financially stable, they're tithing, right? And they're saying that, I give my 10%, I'm blessed in that regard, right?
Yes.
So a lot of that comes from a plethora of things, right? You can have a 2-parent household who taught you how to manage and budget your finances. You could be college educated. So therefore you have an upper hand on those who are less fortunate financially because they don't understand money in a sense. I don't think money has a soul, but I do think it has a frequency, and you have to be on the frequency of money to understand money. Money has its own language, and so therefore some people have the ability to understand money, and so they're wise in their spendings, thus giving them an opportunity to be able to give more than what most can give. So I think that if a person doesn't have at least perhaps 10% of their check, just stored up in their savings account, they shouldn't be tithing. Now, if you have that somewhere saved up, if you have maybe $2,000 just sitting aside somewhere, and every time you get a check, you have an additional 10% to give, then by all means, you should give because you're fortunate enough to do it. But if you're not in that position, you shouldn't be giving because you're putting holes in your pocket. This is in essence what you're doing.
But a lot of people are fearful that if they don't give, those holes are going to get bigger because they are. So, okay, my question to you is this.
The holes
is the person, let's say that you have your typical, like a regular Christian person who really believes in this whole, you're going to be cursed with a curse if you don't tithe. And they're, barely making ends meet, and they're just trying to survive. How do you help that person get rid of that fear that they have that if they don't tithe, they're going to be cursed, and if they don't, because they've been brought up with this for like generations. So how do you help them surpass their fear of, if I don't tithe, I'm going to be punished because God says that I'm supposed to do this, so that they can get to a better financial place using the Bible, using something that they believe and that they trust? How would you move them into that space?
Well, that I want to tell you that I can't. I think it's their mind. They have to unlock their own minds and their perception of the Bible, because if they're not willing to read it for them, because most of the time they're just going based off what they've been taught for years, but they've never done a true study into what a tithe is, where it came from, how did it start, when did it change. They're just going off the faith of what the preacher's telling them. And an educated person who's, financially stable and have proper application financially is in a position to give in that way. So they're going to feel like, oh, I'm giving and I'm blessed. Of course you're blessed. You came from a blessed area in your life.
What about people that don't? There's a lot of people who came from the gutter and now are like, I stuck to my tithing. I've been tithing ever since I was a child, and I have, all of these other things. And they didn't have the proper 2-parent home, financial literacy situation. They just...
So in a spiritual sense, you have to understand that outside of prayer and your faith, you have to understand the science of the mind. If a person has gotten to the place where they're free financially, they've unlocked the science or the frequency of money. So they now have set themselves up and they understand budgeting and different things like that. So they continue to tithe. But when they were lacking, right, and they were tithing, it was still a lack, but you've learned how to cope with this suppression of lack. We kind of learn how to exist in that. Like when we don't have, we learn how to exist. We find peace in that. And so as we find our peace in that, we still continue to do our everyday things and get by. We still get by. We still find ways to get by, but that doesn't mean that it's financially correct.
So there's somebody out there that's listening to you that's saying, oh, okay. So when the example was that the person was highly blessed, that they had, money in the bank and they had their home and they had their car, you said, oh, no, that's not attributed to tithing. That's attributed to the fact that they come from a 2-parent home that taught them about how to spend their money and how to budget and yada, yada, yada. That just comes from having financial literacy. Oh, okay. So now when the example is, oh, this person came from the gutter and this person pulled themselves up and now and they've been tithing and now they have all of these things that the rich person had, you're saying, oh no, but they just unlocked their mind and they were able to get themselves on the frequency of money. In neither cases did you attribute that maybe their blessings are coming from the fact that they're tithing.
Because it's not.
Well, how do you know that?
So me personally, I don't feel that it's coming from tithing. I think that it's coming from them gaining the proper understanding of how finances work, the application of finances. And I think over time, when you do that, that's the science of the mind. You're unlocking not just your understanding, but you also unlock your spirituality, the spiritual aspect of your faith as well. Now, as far as the giving aspect, I guess you could say if they're willing to give in that regard, they can be blessed for just giving. I want to give. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tithe. It could be anything. If you want to give without the expectation of receiving, then I truly believe that you will find blessings in that because you find gratitude in the thought of giving. I believe that blessings come from the gratitude of a thing, and that most people pay a tithe. They pay a tithe. They don't give a tithe. They're giving it based on a bill. It's like a bill. Mm-hmm. Like I have to do this. I have to do this every time I get paid. I take my money out like we do for our cable bill. So when I'm referencing that, and when I reference they both, I kept it consistent. I said that a person who comes from maybe a 2-parent home, their parents understand finances or they taught them finances, they have an upper hand. The person who came from the gutter had to evolve in thought and grow and come to this understanding. And then once they got there, they unlocked the frequency of money, and so they begin to understand how to properly apply the application of money. I guarantee you those people who are in position aren't just blowing money like the people who don't really understand the application of money. They have a different mindset. Their mindsets are totally different. And what they'll do is they'll say, well, it's your faith. But in reality, if you really think about it, a person who jumps out on faith, right? They may not have everything that they need, but they jump out on faith because they have a strong support system, which means that somebody around them is supporting them and pushing them, and they believe in them, right? B, they're going to take off. They're going to keep working. They have a strong work ethic, which means they're going to keep working no matter what. They don't see it, but they see it, right? It's not there, but I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep clawing no matter what. That within itself tells God that you want it more than anything. And that is consistency. That's consistency. That has nothing to do with money. That has to do with your work that you're putting in. You're putting in work. And when you put in that work, it has no choice but to return to you. It can't return to you void. It's the natural order of life. So I believe there's a lot of components that go into that whole blessing thing, because we can take a person who may not have faith, who may not believe in God, and they can have just as much wealth as a person who do believe in God.
I know that a lot of people that are listening to this are going to be like, and that's why they ain't blessed, because they don't tithe. Look at them. They blah, 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 blah. And they're going to go on and make a list for themselves on how, to prove themselves correct that it is because we don't tithe that we don't have X, Y, and Z. And it is because they do that they have X, Y, and Z.
Well, I challenge that person to understand what is a blessing. Because what one person identifies as a blessing, another person doesn't. I have a very strong, solid marriage. I have 2 healthy kids. I've had an opportunity to advance in my career. I've seen many different things, traveled places. I've had an opportunity to me, those are blessings, and I'm very grateful for them.
Me too.
And I have great gratitude for. Am I at where I really want to be? No, because I'm always wanting to have more and grow and evolve. Mm-hmm. But I mean, even the person that's in that mansion still has a level of I want more. That's on any level that you go to when you think about it. Every level goes to that. Now a person who perhaps who's saying things like that. I think that there's a bit of jealousy, because they look and they see that there's a certain level of peace and blessings on your end, but perhaps they want to find a reason to nitpick as into why they perceive or they look blessed despite them not giving a tenth. They find reasons to pick and poke at perhaps what you have versus what they have. Because just like they can point at you and say, hey, you don't have this, or you don't have that. You can point at them and say, well, you're lacking this and you're lacking that. Mm-hmm. But we're not doing that. That's not what we're here for. We're here to make people grasp an understanding of why we don't tithe.
All in all, my thoughts are that I do believe that the tithe was necessary at one point, and I do believe that the law did change. And I completely agree with the fact that if you're going to adopt a part of the law, then you need to adopt the entire thing. And if Jesus came and you believe that, and he transferred over all power to himself and brought you under a new rule of grace, then you don't have to do this compulsory. Like this is not something, like you said, it's not like a bill. It's not this fear that you need to have over if you want to tithe because you want to bless your church house, your pastor, whatever the case may be. If you want to do an offering, that's fine. But what I feel sad about sometimes is seeing people have this desperation to pay this 10% because they feel this fear about being cursed, about God punishing them because this one paycheck didn't get tithed on, and their light bills are not paid, or their credit card bills are not paid, or whatever the case may be, because they live under this constant fear. I don't think that was Jesus or God's intent to have you live under fear, especially when it's like anything that seems too like man-made to me is always like, it always strikes a chord when that, like, if you're feeling the same type of anxiety for your tithe that you feel towards Sally Mae calling you, or that you feel towards your car getting repoed, there's something about God that's just not in that mix. I don't think that God is A, that concerned about money, or B, that concerned about punishing you if you don't do this one thing. So like I said, I think that if you want to tithe, if you feel like that was your tradition, those are your practices, that's fine, but don't quote the Bible and say that other people that don't do that are cursed with a curse, because that's not correct. Like, say I want to tithe because I like to tithe and I like to bless my home, not because the Bible tells me to do that, because the Bible is no longer telling you to do that. And two, if you tithe, make sure that you check in with yourself and that you're doing this because you want to benefit the programs that your church puts on, or whatever the case may be, and not because you're so afraid that something is going to befall upon you, because I don't think that that's how God operates. And furthermore, I think that you should check the surroundings of your church and you should say, where is my money going to? I think that you have the responsibility as a churchgoer and as a member of that community to double check and make sure that your money is going somewhere where you agree to it. Like, it cannot be that you have spent the last 10 years repairing a doorknob. Like, something has to change. There has to be programs that your church is putting on. There has to be people in your church that your pastors are blessing. And your pastor, I think, should not be living so above your own means that it makes, like, I'm not saying the pastors this is a whole nother topic, and I'm not saying the pastors need to be living like, oh, can you spare some change? But I do think that there should be like a medium. Like, if your church is, you have your $10,000 a year and you have your $1 million a year, your pastor should fall somewhere down the middle. If your pastor is at $1 million a year and you're still writing them checks for love offerings, I think that you should do a love offering for yourself too.
So you said a lot, but it's one point that I really want to break down. And when I say money carries and is a frequency, and you have to be on the frequency of money to speak the language of money and understand money, you have to realize that religion, and I've said this in the last podcast, that religion has a layer to it, and it's very layered in the sense of how it's constructing your consciousness, the way you're thinking about your spirituality and the way you want to give to God, right? So you made a point to where a person who maybe is not as fortunate, or they feel like they have to tithe and they have to pay their light bill, so they didn't give their tithe, so therefore their bill was late the next month, and they feel like it's because God was getting on them for not tithing that money.
Mm-hmm. People believe
right?
that.
They believe that because they're basically okay, so let me put myself in the box of religion. The reason why they're going through that, right, and let me meet them on that level, is because you're not given to the right house of God. Therefore, the Bible also says that you're not supposed to pull one part of the law and not all of the law. So because tithing was of the Mosaic covering, and you're continuing to tithe, you're cursing yourself because you're borrowing one part of the law. So that means that what's happening is, because you're giving 10% to the wrong house, you constantly find yourself in a loophole to where you have a lack of paying the bill for the next month. So there's always going to be a lack because you're giving 10% off of what you barely have to give to begin with, right? So if your bills level out, and now we're going to bring it to the science of just the natural life existence. If your bills level out to $1,200 or $1,300 for the month, and you're giving 10% of what you make, that's what, $120, right? Say if you make $1,200, that's $120 that you're putting to the side. Your light bill is $120. You're neglecting that $120 plus on top of rent. So it's like you're rolling over into the next month. You're not putting back. So basically, the house of God is your body, right? The Bible says that your body is the temple of God. God does not dwell in a temple made by man's hands. So if you're going to tithe, you need to tithe to the right house. So that 10% should be going back into you, into your savings. And then you will see the meat in your house at the end of the day. Literally.
And I want to correct myself really quickly. I think completely, I agree. But I want to make sure that when I say, like, I know that people often hold on to like a one little piece of something that you said and like want to build their entire argument off of that. Once again, I am not saying that pastors need to live a certain type of way or that tithes automatically go to the pastors. I'm just saying that when you give your money, you have the responsibility. You have the responsibility and the right to ask where your money is going and to make sure that there are some like checks and balances within your church, especially when the church starts to get really big. I think in small churches sometimes and in storefronts, like churches, you can really see where your money is going because it's like 10 people there. And like, you can see, oh, it was for the car wash. It was for the chicken dinner. Like you can see where your money's going. Whereas when it gets big, it gets a little bit out of control and you really can't really track it. Once again, not speaking against any mega church. I'm just saying you have the right and responsibility to track your money. Also, for the people who watch this podcast that are from my home church, I grew up baby church. My parents did not teach me any of this. My parents used to give me $1 and tell me to go to the corner store, break that dollar so that I can get my 10 cents and put it in my little offering, my little tithing thing. Then give my 50-cent offering and take my little 40-cent, whatever was left over, to the corner store to get me a gum. So I was not taught any of this by my parents. My parents taught me the tithing way. These were just thoughts that I came across as I grew older.
I grew up the same way she did. But anyways, so this has been tithing, guys, and hey, this is just our experiences on why we don't tithe, but it's totally up to you guys, and you're gonna make the decision that you make. It's no need to create rebuttal videos or go back and forth with me because I'm not gonna go back and forth with you about this.
No, but people want to give their comments.
It's fine. I want them to leave their comments so that I can read them, so that I can chat with them about why they believe what they believe. But what I'm not gonna do is get into an energy exchange with you back and forth,
like that.
About why I should or, so on and so forth, why I'm wrong. Because until you just understand that these are just experiences and we're sharing our experiences with you, and maybe something that we said out there could help someone. Maybe we can help. Maybe what we said may push them further into tithing. We don't know. But the fact of the matter is we helped.
Hopefully somebody. And I'm not saying, okay, we helped somebody. Okay.
So anyway, this has been your boy V, O and V. This has been your boy O
and V.
And thank you guys for tuning in, and we're out of here. Peace.